Uh, uh, okay. Cool, cool, cool. So yeah, you can just visit this site and this is completely open. So we have provided all the notes or all the session summary that we covered in the past two sessions. You can actually go through it. Like in the last session, we are basically talking about the move.yaml file. Sorry, not YAML. But did I say YAML? I mean move.toml file and everything, right? So this sort of works like our package.json where we have all the configurations and dependencies and all those kind of stuff. And we also discuss the move.log file, right? So this file is different from the YAML one because so why do I keep saying YAML? I mean, this one is also different from the toml file because this is actually automatically generated when we build our code, right? Or when we compile our code, meaning all the details in the log file is pretty much, set or it is pretty much finalized. So you shouldn't, or if you edit the log file, it can cause errors. Okay. So we learned about these two components and then a lot of keywords, right? So one of the major keywords is the module keyword, meaning when you look at the whole when you're writing the contracts on move on Sui, the thing is you don't use the word contract for it, you actually call it as a module, right? And this module is actually defined using the keyword module, and in order to import we use the keyword use, right? It is pretty straightforward, right? In order to use a library in your or a package in your contract, you just use the keyword use. And this is how a typical contract looks like. Yeah. Well, like you have to mention the package name that is already declared in your move.toml file. And once you have that, you can provide the name of the module. Then this is how you import new packages, like you are or import new modules onto your own module. Like here, you from the Sui package, from the object module, you're actually getting the UUID thing. And we also talked about the struct, right? The struct is a data structure that allows you to format data in a key value format, right? You'll have the key and you can actually store the value against it. And in Sui, the thing is you can actually convert normal struct to a Sui object by adding the key ability, right? You have this key ability and you can add it. And once you add it, you also have to provide the ID field to the struct. And we also talked about the constructors, right? And just like how we have constructors, or just like how we have uh, yeah. Just like how we use constructors in Solidity, we have the same stuff in uh, you know uh, move tree also, where you can use this function. Like this is the default function that is basically called by the contract upon deployment, and there you can provide the initial values and everything, right? And the name is like in Solidity we just use the word constructor, but here it is the init function. Like you have to mention it as the init function. And one thing is like when you are declaring an init function, one of the parameters should be the transaction context. Okay, the last parameter should be the transaction context. Like that is actually a mandatory parameter that goes with the init function or the constructor. And we also learned about the variable declaration. Like let is used to declare the variable and const is used to declare the constant, right? And this whole capital thing is essentially a convention. It's not a mandatory thing, like it is a convention, so that you know that a particular, like if you use all caps, then you know that it is a constructor. Oh, sorry, you know that it is a constant. And we also talked about the unsigned integers and all those different data types that we can use, right? So u8 or meaning u in date, like how we use u in date. And by unsigned integers, we mean numbers greater than zero to all the positive numbers, right? And you have boolean, you have instead of arrays you have something called vectors. You have string, which is treated as a separate entity itself. And you have the addresses. So unlike Solidity, where you can actually define a particular variable, or you can define the data type as address, here you just use an symbol, right? So these are the topics that we covered yesterday, so you can actually go through it from this summary website that we have. I think it is already shared in the mails too. So like all the invite emails, you'll get linked to this page. You can just go through it and just revise. Right. So any questions or doubts regarding any of this? Do you guys have any questions, doubts, anything regarding any of these things? Awesome. Awesome. So yeah. Uh, yeah. All right. So yeah. Okay, so yeah, so today what we're going to do is we are going to learn something called the control statements or flow statements. So what exactly is a flow statement, or how do you control, or what does that mean? Controlling the flow in a code. What do you mean when you say like you're controlling the flow? Or how do you control a flow of a program? No idea. See, the thing is like when you look at programming languages, uh, branch, yes, exactly. See, a program cannot be simply a linear thing. It's not like okay, do this, then do that, then after this, do this. Like typically a program won't be that simple or linear, right? Sometimes what you have to do is you have to take a different logical operation based on certain conditions, right? Suppose the condition is true, or suppose a variable has this value, then you might have to take a different path, right? So that is basically the whole controlling of the flow. Meaning, based on the values or based on the conditions, you take a different path within the same program, right? And usually, what are the things or what are the statements that we use for the control? I think Dawood has already mentioned the majority, right? We usually use if statements, if else statements, and stuff, right? And there is also like so yeah, so this whole control flow is basically about learning how to implement the if else statements and everything in move on to. Okay, now another, I don't know if it is a cool feature, but it's pretty odd. Like since I have worked with a lot of other languages. There is something on move on to that is quite. I don't know if it's a positive thing, but the thing is, do you guys know that move on Sui actually doesn't support loops, right? Loops, right? Like for and while and all those kind of things. So move on Sui actually doesn't support that because sometimes like in order to avoid any kind of infinite loops or any kind of repetitions and that will affect the efficiency. They have some workaround for it, but they don't directly support for and while loops, right? Like what are your thoughts on that? Like is it a good thing? Like personally I feel that it is a bit weird, right? Like we for and while is like some of the most fundamental things that we use while coding, right? But here, like in move, the thing is they don't actually, uh, you know, for while loops are actually not supported. Oh wow, John is trying to get into but joining. John is. Hey John, what's up? Okay, so yeah, as I was saying, like so in order to like this, yeah, the thing is move avoids using for and while loop so that they can prevent like not non-terminating loops or infinite executions and stuff like that. But if else is there. Okay, so and the thing is like when you look at it, uh, a second. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's not just about commands and stuff. Yeah, like how do you do the reiterations of a command, or how do you iterate through an array, right? You have vectors in move, right? So how do you iterate through that? So it can be a bit confusing, but there are ways to do it. Okay, there are ways to do it. Like there are workarounds. So yeah, don't worry. So the thing is, like, if you go here, let me just paste this. So yeah, so this is yeah. Okay. So yeah, you can see that there is a main function, and this is basically how you provide the if else block. Okay. So you can see that it is pretty much like how we do with JavaScript and everything. You put the if, you put the condition, and here what like, can you guys figure out what is happening here? Like what will be the output of this whole thing? Any idea on what this whole logic is? B equal to 10. Okay, so what is the logic here? What are we doing in this program? Using the flow statement. So this is the best, this is a really good example of flow, controlling the flow, right? So here, as you can see, we have a variable, we have declared a variable A. Yeah, exactly. There you go. As Dawood suggested. So we have declared a variable A, and that is a Boolean variable, and it is of the value true, right? It is of the value true. So here we are also creating a variable B, but for B, the value is actually based on an if condition. Okay, so here we are saying that if A, what does this mean? If A, what does that mean? What do you mean by if A? See, this is actually no. So this means that if A double equals to true. Okay, so if A, like, this is actually a shorthand. Okay, this is actually, yeah, if A is true, that's basically what is happening. So this is sort of like a shorthand. Okay, so what we are saying, with if we just give A, what it checks is if this is true or not. Like if we just provide the variable here, if it is a Boolean variable, it will check if it, within the if condition, if you give a variable that is Boolean, it will check whether it is true or false. Okay, but if it is any other variable, like if it's a uint variable or whatever, here it will check whether that variable has a value or not. Okay, so if A in this sense means it is checking if the value of A is true or not. Okay, and it will enter this condition only if the value is true. Okay, so the thing is, the value of B, like you can see that the value of B here actually depends on the value of A, right? So here it means that if A is actually true, then the value of B will be 10, right? And if A is false, the value will be 20. Right? So that is how you control the flow. Right? You just put an if statement, you just put an if statement and say that, okay, if the value is A, like we are checking the condition that if A is true, then just provide the value 10. If else, if A is false, just provide the value 20. How do I invert this? Can anybody tell me, like, how do I invert this? I want the value of B to be 10 if A is false. So what is the most simplest way to do that in this condition? Do you guys understand? Like, I want the value to be 10 if A is false. Yeah, that is already there, but I just want, in this, how would I modify it? Yeah, else condition is there. I mean, like, how do I say that? How do I, create a condition that checks it? So I want to say that if A is false, then 10, else it is 20. Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's all about adding a little inversion here, right? So here what we are doing is if A is false, then it will invert the whole thing, right? This inversion, yeah, the not statement, exactly. Exactly. Right. The not statement. So here what it will do is if A is false, the whole inversion thing, it will just invert the value to true and it will enter this block, meaning the value will be 10. Right. So that is how if else works. It is pretty straightforward, right? Any questions or doubts here? Right? Any questions here? So, and one thing that you have to note is like when you are actually returning something using an if else, the returning data type should be the same. Okay, you can't return a 10 here and a 20 here. I mean, you can't return a 10 here and an A or a character here. Okay, the data type should be the same because the receiving variable will only have one data type, right? So otherwise, like the whole thing will just cause errors, right? So that is how So that is how you actually implement the if else statement in move on Sui, right? It is pretty straightforward. Only thing that you have to worry is like since the whole thing is deterministic, like the data that is returned from the if and else statement should be the same. Okay, it should have the same data type. That's it. And here we are just adding that value to the number object. Like we have an object and we are just adding it here. So yeah, any questions here? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but any questions? It's pretty straightforward, right? So this is another iteration of it. Let me just yeah. So let me just add this one. So this is also an iteration. This is also another iteration of this thing. So here, what we are doing is we are not using the else statement. Okay. So instead of the else statement, we are simply saying like, okay, package section. Okay, yeah. So the package name is different. So here we are saying that like without, so here what will be the value here? Like you can see that if A is true, then it will be 10. There is no else statement, right? So this is basically the same stuff, but instead of the else statement. Here, if you want to inverse it, we just have to give the inversion like that, not inversion exclamation mark here. Okay. So yeah, so this is how we basically use the if and else statement, which is one of the control statements that we use in move on to. And another one is something called as assert or assertion. Any idea on what this is? Like we have a similar thing in Solidity too. Any idea on what assertion does? Any idea on what assertion does? No idea. We have a similar thing in Solidity too. See, assertion, what happens is it is actually used to abort or stop a program if a condition is not met. Yeah. So yeah, the thing is like assertion is actually used in order to block a program from execution if a condition is not met. Just like how we use the require function. or require the require function and solidity, right? You guys know how that works, right? So you have the whole you can give a condition inside require, and if that condition is not met, then the entire contract execution is halted, right? So assertion is basically the same thing. Okay, so assertion, like what we do is we use this whole keyword like assert with that exclamation mark, and we give the condition. So here what happens is, if this condition is not met, the code will won't the code won't execute. Like here, if A is not equal to true, then the code won't execute. Okay. Okay. Right, yeah, so that is how assertion works. Okay, so you give a condition, and if that condition is not met, it won't go to another branch. It won't if there is no else statement, it will completely hold the program. Do you guys understand? It will completely hold the program from execution. So this is really, really helpful in a lot of scenarios. Suppose you are transferring some money, or suppose there is some, if you would like to, only transfer to a particular address or something like that, where you require some kind of an access to the contract or access control, you can just use an assert, or you can use certain values saying that if this person has a balance of, continue the execution of the contract only if this person has these many Sui tokens in his account, or continue this execution if this person has this address, right? So for such situations, in order to completely hold the execution of the contract, you use the assert statement, right? Do you guys understand the difference? Like with if else, you can actually branch the whole thing, right? If with if else, you can say that it is either this value or that. Okay, with assertion, what we are doing is we are saying that, okay, if the condition is not true or if the condition is not met, you can't execute the program. Do you guys understand the difference? Any questions or doubts there? Is it clear? Awesome. Okay. Right. So that's the whole purpose of assert. So, and then there is also awesome. Awesome. So yeah. So the third one, or a way to actually control the flow, is through something called as recursion. What is recursion? Any idea? Do you know what a recursion is? A recursive function. Yes, there you go. So as Siddharth has mentioned, so a recursion means that a function will call itself. Okay. So the thing is, like, suppose there is a scenario where a function keeps calling itself. So there is a chance of an infinite execution there, right? Like suppose a function is calling itself, right? It sort of works like a for loop or a while loop, or stuff like that, right? Where the whole recursion can go on forever, right? So how do you stop it? How do you stop it? Yeah. So the thing is, like, when you look at recursion, for example, this is actually one of the most like most used examples when we are actually looking into recursion, right? What do you mean by factorial? What is the whole idea of a factorial? Do you know what a factorial? Let's say, what is the factorial of 5? Any idea? Yeah. So what is a factorial? So what is Shiva just said, yeah, okay. I mean, what is the idea there? How do you get that 120? Factorial means you are multiplying all these numbers, right? 5 factorial means 1 into 2 into 3 into all the way up to 5, right? Yeah, there you go. So this is actually one way to carry out the whole thing. Okay, so you can see that this is an example of a recursive function. So we have a function called factorial, and you can see that within that function we are calling the function itself. Okay, within the factorial we are calling the function itself. Okay, so what we are doing is yeah. So like in order to understand the flow, and this statement is for returning. Like it says that, so this is how you actually provide the return. Okay, here we are saying that there is this function and it is returning a value that is also UN64. Okay, so this is how you provide that return. Like in Solidity, you use the returns keyword, right? So here you just use like U64. That's it. Okay, so yeah, here so what is happening is okay. So in this function, so in order to call this function, let's say we give the let me just in the code base and I'll help you understand this. Okay. All right. So let's say we want to find the factorial of 5. Okay. So we give 5. Right. So what is happening here? What is happening here? So here it will check whether 5 is equal to 0 or not. Okay, if it is 0, then it should, this condition, like using the if statement, we will just return 1. Otherwise, it will enter this loop. Okay, so here for the first time, what it is doing is like this will also return something, but the return statement is like it is saying that it should return 5 into and like 5 times. Like it is saying that in the next statement you should again call this function, but this time you should actually provide the value that is 5 minus 1. So what happens is here it will recall the factorial function, but as a parameter it will provide the value 4. Okay, here we are providing the value 4, right? So 5 into, like we are saying that we just need the value 4 here. So this will again enter this loop, right? Here it will check if the value is 4 or not, the value here is 0 or not. Else, here what we will do is we'll again do the same thing, right? Here we'll say 4 into the factorial of 3. Okay, and in the next iteration, it will go on until like each of them will keep on returning the thing until we meet this condition, which is until the n becomes 0. Okay, once the n becomes 0, it will just return 1. Meaning all these things will be just like how we do 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. That is how the whole thing will work. But until then, we will just keep on calling this function. So this is the whole idea of recursion. Okay, so here it will be 3 into 2. For the next iteration, it will be 2 into 1. And for the next iteration, it will just return 1, because this will become 0. Right? So 1 into 1 into 2 into 3 into 4, like it will go all the way till 5. Just like how factorial works. Once it hits 0, it will just return 1, meaning it will just multiply all the other things and return the factorial. So this is how you do it, or this is how like like if you are using a for loop, this is pretty easy, right? Like you can also do the whole factorial thing using a for loop, right? For I equal to 1, I less than or equal to the number, you can just loop through the numbers and get the product, right? But this is how you do it using recursion, and this is allowed in move on Sui, provided you have a condition to break the recursion. Right? Do you guys understand the whole concept? Any questions or doubts here? Anybody have any questions or doubts regarding recursion? It's pretty like it's the same logic that there are a lot of times where you have to do this, like where you can use recursion to recall functions and stuff. Like factorial is the most simplest example. That's why everybody uses factorial, right, for this. But there are functions other. So the thing is, like there are ways, there are workarounds for that. But the thing is, in order to prevent any kind of like move on Sui is very strict when it comes to efficiency and stuff. So in order to prevent any kind of infinite loops or there's infinite recursions and stuff, that's why they don't actively promote while loops or for loops and stuff. But there are workarounds. Okay, there are ways in which we can index the vectors and stuff like that. There are workarounds for it, but not in the same way that we usually do the loops. Here the thing is, since it is focusing on efficiency, like it has crafted something around that. We'll look into it. But yeah, so these are the major things that we can use in order to control the flow. There is the if statement, there is the if else statement, there is the assert statement, and there is also it also allows recursion, provided there is a condition that we can use to prevent it from doing an infinite recursive call or anything, right? So I hope this part is clear, right? Any questions? Any questions or doubts? Awesome. So yeah, so the next is called expressions. Okay. Any idea what like this expression is not something that is unique to Sui, right? It exists in every language. Okay, so what is the idea behind an expression? What is an expression? When do you say that there is an expression in the code? I mean, the answer is right there. But the thing is, see, usually we use the term statement for it. Like sometimes it's statement or expression. Okay. So the thing is, if it ends with a semicolon, right? If any line in your program ends with a semicolon, we are talking about these lines. Okay. Like, these blocks or these lines, these lines and stuff. So all these, or, let's say you are declaring a variable, let's say, let a equals 10. Okay. So this is an expression. Yeah, exactly. So it, whenever it ends in a semicolon, that's basically an expression. Okay. It can be anything. It can be, providing a value, updating the value, or any kind of things. And the thing is, in Sui, like we have like 3 kinds of expressions. Okay. We have like 3 separate kinds of expressions. See, one of the first ones is something called as an empty expression. So here, okay. So the thing is, like here, like usually when we talk about statements or expressions, it's just the single line that returns something, or that has that semicolon at the end. But here we have 3 types of expressions. Okay. So the first type is the empty expression. Okay. So empty expression means that there is nothing in it. It's just a block of code that does nothing. Okay. Meaning it is just a block of code that absolutely does nothing. You can see that there is a function name, and there is nothing in it. Okay, but this is what is called an empty expression. This is also an expression. It is also considered an expression in Sui. Okay, it is just a block of code, but it does nothing. So it is an empty expression. Okay, then there is the literal expression. This is what we usually define as an expression, like when there is a semicolon, right? So it can be a variable declaration, it can be the value declaration. Anything that ends in a semicolon is considered a literal expression. Meaning, it is doing something. Meaning, an expression is basically a part of the code that is functional. Okay, so here it is empty expression. This is an empty expression because it is not doing anything, but still it is part of the code, right? These are literal expressions because it is either declaring a value, declaring a variable, assigning value, or doing all those kind of stuff. So that is why they are called literal expressions. Okay, then there is block expression. So block expression means anything that is within these curly brackets. Okay, so you can say that a function is an expression. Okay, a function is also an expression that contains a lot of other expressions. Like this is what is mentioned here. Like you can see that this is also an expression. Like so yeah. Can I have expression yeah. So okay. So here it is. It says like so. Even a function that is within the block, like you have the empty expression that has nothing, and you have the block expression. Which is the empty expression, but that does something. So with when you look at that definition, we can actually say that the function is also an expression, right? Because it is a block expression with actually some content in it, right? Or which does something. So that is also an expression in Sui. So this is just a very basic stuff. Like you just need to know the different parts of the code. Okay, this is not like what it means to be an expression in Sui. So this is more of a general knowledge regarding the language rather than a functional or stuff. Like because we all use it, like knowingly or unknowingly, whenever we are typing the code, we create tons of expressions, right? But these are the three classification of. Any questions or doubts regarding this? It's pretty clear, right? Like it basically talks about functional components in your code. So anything that actually does something is an expression. Okay, it might return a value, it ends in semicolon, or it can be even nothing. Like there is just a block of code that does nothing and it is an empty expression. Okay, so yeah. Now another really important thing is something called as the scope. Okay, so every language that you use. Oh, thanks, man. Every language that you use actually has a scope. So how do you define a scope? Does anybody know what a scope is? Let's say you are taking a test. Yeah. You are taking a test, or you are in an interview, or you are doing something. You are learning something, and a particular question comes in that you didn't learn, or that was out of syllabus, or that was not mentioned in your chapter. So you will say this is out of the scope, or this thing is out of scope. What does that mean? So what is the whole term of scope? Yeah, it means the boundary, or yeah, boundary is a good word, or you can say it means the visibility of that variable, right? It means the availability or visibility of that variable, right? Where can we actually access that variable, or within what limits can we actually see or access that variable? Like the boundary is a good term. Like what is the boundary of access of that variable? Right? So what it means is that suppose there is a block that you let me just focus for so a scope basically defines okay. Okay, yeah, so there you go. So a scope actually defines the boundary where this variable will be accessible. Okay, so you can see that you have a function, and a scope is always in Sui, the scope is always defined within these curly brackets. Okay, a curly bracket represents a block of code, and the scope of a variable is always defined by these curly brackets. Okay, for example, if a variable is declared within this curly brackets, the scope will be throughout that block. Okay, for example, like you can see that within the function name, you have this variable called a, which is 0. So the scope of this variable is this complete block that is covered by these curly brackets. Okay, that means it can be this a can be actually accessed here or here or anywhere within this block of code that is defined by these curly brackets. But you like when you look at it, you have another block here, right? We using the curly brackets, we have defined another block, and within that block, we have actually defined a variable called b. Now, what is the scope of b? Can I actually access the value of b outside that block? Let's say, can I say here like a equal to b? Can I say that? Yes, right. See, like Dawood already mentioned, these basically represent these. Yes, can be. So the thing is, as Dawood mentioned, the scope actually represents the boundaries. Okay, and the boundaries are basically these curly brackets. So if so, when we declare a variable within that curly brackets, the scope of that variable is the entire area that is covered by the or entire line of code that is covered by the curly brackets. Yeah. So, but the thing is, this is actually so the yeah, that is basically what we are trying to say here. The scope of B is actually within this block only. Okay, like see, yeah, it cannot. Yeah, that is the thing. So, yeah, I thought there was a more simpler way of explaining this, but yeah, I think it's the same thing. So here, what it means is that so we have defined like since we have defined the variable b inside this block, the scope of this variable is only within this curly brackets. You cannot use it outside the curly bracket. Do you understand? A block, like, so the thing is in Sui, when you are actually defining something, the scope of that thing is actually within the block, which is represented by the curly brackets. Okay, so if I declare something outside all these blocks, like these are the blocks inside the function, and if I declare a variable outside the whole thing, then the scope of this particular variable, like the variable a is within the bounds of this, right? The scope of the variable is actually throughout the complete block, like throughout the block that is represented by these two curly brackets, meaning this variable a can be accessed throughout this code or throughout these lines. But when you look at b, it is actually defined within a block inside the function. So here we cannot access b outside the block. Do you guys understand? So the scope of b is only within this block. It cannot be accessed outside of it. So if you declare a variable inside a curly bracket, the scope of the visibility or we can only access that variable within that block or within those curly brackets only, not outside the curly brackets. Is that clear? Yeah, so this you can't do this. This is wrong. This is an error. This will throw an error. I just want to get that point across. Because B is not accessible. Like B, like this block doesn't know what B is because we haven't defined it here. It is a part of this block only. But let me ask you something. is this valid? Is this valid? Yes, we can do that, right? Because here the scope of this variable a is anywhere between these curly brackets. So it can be like we can access a from this block also. Okay, but we cannot access B outside this block. So as Dawal pointed out, it actually mentions the boundary from which we can access a variable. Okay, that is basically the scope of it. Any questions or doubts? Yes, exactly. You can say that variable A is global, or it can global within this curly brackets. Not global. I mean, yeah, it can be used within anywhere within this curly brackets. But B and C and all these things cannot be. Like even within C, the thing is, so you can see that there is another block C, and there is a variable inside this block called C, and you can see that within that block there is another nested block. Okay, a block called D, and there is a variable called flag. Now this like you can't even do this. This will also throw an error. Okay, because flag, like we haven't mentioned flag in the upper block, we have it is actually part of the nested block. So even this is wrong. This will also throw an error, right? So the scope is actually defined by those curly brackets or the block code, or sorry, the code block. Okay, any questions? Any questions or doubts? It's pretty clear, right? So you have to keep this in mind because a lot of errors can come from the scope. Because sometimes, like when you are writing the code, and if it is a long code, you might not keep track of the scope, right? You might not keep track of the oh yes. I mean, John, that's like Buildweek, right? We are always learning new things here. Anyway, it's nice to have John here because John is quite energetic himself. Yeah. So the thing is, as I mentioned, it is like when you're writing large lines of code, you can easily mess up the scope. Like you might just declare a variable within a block and you might try to use it somewhere else, which can throw an error. And if it's a big, like if it is a code that is stretching like 100 and 150 lines, it can be very hard to keep track of all this. So make sure that you understand scope, understand how where it can, the variable can be accessed, and and all those kind of things, right? But so if you want to access a variable throughout a block, you just have to declare it like this. So this particular variable is visible or it is accessible from all these blocks, including the nested block. Okay, because it sits at the top or it sits outside all these blocks. Right? So any questions or doubts there? Any questions or doubts? Anybody have any questions, doubts, anything? It's pretty easy, right? I mean, yeah, like these parts are pretty easy. Like that's why like we are not executing like running the code in parallel because a lot of these things are easy. And of course, since we have numbers, we are going to have operators. So I think most of these will be familiar. You have the arithmetic operators like sum, division, subtraction, multiplication, modulus. This L shift and right shift, R shift is bit operators. Like we will learn about this, and you have the and XOR. Like it is also a variation. Like and is for that condition. Like if A and B is true. or like if like you give two variables and you say that okay, and like if both of them are true, then execute a statement. So you use and. So you have a similar kind of a stuff with XOR, but I think the thing is with XOR, you actually need an example to actually see how that works, which we will show in the upcoming sessions. So, and so apart from the operators, there is another unique thing about Sui. Okay, so like we already talked about the fact that Sui is super efficient, right? Move on Sui is super efficient. Okay, meaning yeah, we can represent decimals. Yes, yes, decimal values and stuff. Yes. Is it decimals or are you talking about decimals or that bitwise thing? Decimals or binary format? Yeah, the floating values. Oh, okay. Decimal points. Yeah, yeah, got it, got it. Yeah, true, true, true. So yeah, I think we are doing this. Like at the end of this whole thing, you will be using something that uses all the floating values and stuff. So yeah, so another cool feature about Sui is that as we already mentioned, like Sui actually is hell-bent on efficiency and stuff, right? So it actually throws an error if we declare a variable and doesn't use it. Okay, like Sui will actually throw an error saying that you are wasting, what are you doing? You are not, you have just declared a variable and you haven't used it, right? It will actually throw an error if there is an unused variable. So there is also a backend to it, meaning there is a way where we can actually declare a variable and not use it, but it shouldn't be a name like this. This will give an error. Here we have defined a variable called sum and we are not using it. So this will basically throw some warning or error saying that you are not using this variable. But in order to work around, in order for a workaround, you have this underscore. Okay. You have this thing, you can actually declare a variable like this. Just a let and this underscore. Okay. And if you declare it like this, then this won't throw an error. Do you understand? Like if you are actually using this underscore in order to define the value, it won't throw an error even if you don't use it anywhere. Do you understand? This is just a quick walk around. Okay. This is not like I don't think there will be any use to it. Like I haven't used this thing, but it's a general thing that is nice to know, right? Usually, but you have to remember that if there is a value that you declared, or if there is a variable that you declare in Sui, and if you don't use it, it will definitely throw an error. Okay, it will throw an error, right? But and a workaround for that is instead of naming the variable, you can just use the underscore, and it won't throw the error. Okay, so yeah, any questions here regarding the scope, regarding the operators, anything? Any doubts, any questions? Is more statically or dynamically typed? Okay, who can answer that? What do you think? What is the whole idea of statically typed and dynamically typed? I mean, I think the answer is in the question itself. What is the whole idea behind statically typed? And yeah, what do you mean by statically typed? Right? Or can you give me an example of a statically typed language? Ah, okay. Java, exactly. So statically typed means that the data type of the variable, okay, should be known at the compile time. Meaning when you are declaring a variable, you should actually provide the type of data that the variable will hold. That is what we mean by statically typed. Dynamically typed means the value will only be known during the execution or when you are actually running the program. You don't have to declare the value or the data type of the variable during when you write the code. That is dynamic. Like you can dynamically allocate any kind of data to a variable. Statically means you can only set one data type and that variable can only hold that data type. Okay, so based on that, what is move? Like move on tree, is it a statically typed or dynamically typed language? Are we providing the data type at the time of writing the code, or are we just, or can we use any like dynamically allocate any data value to a variable? So which is it? Like so, Sui is move on Sui is a statically typed or dynamically typed? Come on, guys. Based on the explanation, tell me if move on Sui is dynamically typed. Dynamic, really? Yes. There you go. See, the thing is, statically typed means, or very means sarcastic, Shankara. Yeah, so anyway, so the thing is, statically typed. Oh, okay. No, no, no. So the thing is, statically typed means you have to provide the data type of the variable at the time of declaration. Meaning, when you are compiling the code, the the compiler should know what type of data will the variable hold. Meaning, when you are mentioning a variable, you should actually, provide the data variable there. Okay. Did somebody post anything on Discord? Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. So as I was saying, so when you look at these languages, there are certain languages like Java, C++, and all those things, right? Where you have to mention the type of data that the variable is holding. Okay. In Java, it will be like in C++, it will be like int A or string B or something like that, right? So such kind of language is what we call statically typed, meaning the data or the data type of the variable is known. In languages like JavaScript, you don't know the variable or the data type of the variable unless you provided some data. So if I declare a variable, it can hold string, it can hold number, it can hold anything, right? So that is not how C++ works. So Java JS is actually, you know, so yeah, so okay. So as I was saying, just give me a second. I'm getting some messages. That's why it's lag from my end. Sorry about this. Yeah. Yeah. So as I was saying, so when you look at C++, and Java and all those kind of languages, you have to provide the value or the data type when you declare the variable, right? So that is what is statically typed language, meaning you are setting the data value or data type when you're declaring the variable. right? Dynamic means you don't have to do it. Whenever the data comes, it will be dynamically allocated and the variable is fine with it, right? So move on Sui is actually a statically typed language, meaning the data type should be known. As somebody already pointed out, Rust, it is based on Rust, and Rust is also a statically typed language. Okay. So yeah, any questions or confusions regarding that? Yeah, Tirumala, yeah, that's actually a good point. All right. So yeah, so moving on. So any questions or doubts? Any other questions or doubts? Any questions or doubts from your end? Awesome. So yeah, I think this section is pretty, this is going to be like the function is going to be pretty simple because we have been working with, like we have seen a lot of functions, right? So yeah, for functions, you use the, why is my screen displaying? All right, yeah, there you go. So this is how you declare a function in, move on suite. You use the fun keyword, right? Fun and the function name, right? So, it is pretty simple, like, a different, in Solidity, it was like you use the function keyword. Here it is fun, right? And you, just like how you do with Solidity, you provide the brackets and the curly brackets and everything, right? And you can give the parameters here. So within the module, you can see that, like, when you are giving a function here, you can provide the keyword, the name, and the parameters. And for the parameters, you should actually mention the data type because it is a statically typed language, right? You can see that in order to mention the data type, you give the colon and you give the data type, right? So yeah, I think this, I think we already see this. Yeah, so this is, and you can, like, every function is, it's usually inside a module, which, that we have seen, like even in our code. Yeah, you have the function here and you can give the variables. So it can be anything. So when you are giving the parameters, you just have to mention the, type of it. Okay. Whether it's, uint8 or, whatever, string or whatever, right? And so, this is how a typical function will look like. Like you have the name, you have the parameters and everything, right? So this section basically defines all the things that we have seen so far. And another thing is, so when you're returning something, like you remember, like in Solidity, oh, is it okay now? Is it okay now? Hello? Okay. So yeah. So the thing is, like when you're returning something, from a function, if you are returning something just like how we do in Solidity, you have to specify the kind of data that a function is returning. Okay. And to do that, you, like, once you declare the function like this, you have to add an additional a statement, like, just like how you give the data type declaration, you also have to do the same for the function. Oh, okay. Anyway, so yeah, just like how you provide the data type here, you just have to do the same with the function. This means that this function will be returning a uint8 variable. Okay, so I think yeah. So this is an example that is provided here. So you can see that, okay. So you can see that there is this function called fill name that takes in a vector or an array of uint8, meaning, an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, all those kind of things, and the transaction context. And using the transaction context, it is creating a new ID. So this is actually a module within the object module, and it actually helps you create a new ID using the context keyword. Okay, it's sort of like a function there, not a module, sorry, a function there that lets you create a new ID using the context, and you are providing the name here. Okay, so this is what a typical function looks like. You have the you know arguments. You have to provide the the data type, and here you can also provide the custom return types. Okay, the thing is, you can see that this is a struct that we have defined, right? This is a separate user defined data type. So what we are saying is this fill name function, it actually returns data that is of the type name. Okay, that is so you can either mention uint or string or whatever, but if you want to give custom data types, you can also do that. Like here we have created a name struct, and here we are saying that this function returns value that is of the type name. Okay, it's pretty like any confusions here? I feel like these portions are pretty easy, right? Any confusions here? Like how the function is defined, how the return type is defined, and everything. Any questions or confusions here? Anybody? Is it a yes or a no? Or are you guys saying something? Okay. Like any doubts still here? It's pretty straightforward, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just functions and stuff. So yeah. So I guess the next part is something called as visibility specifiers. Now explain what a visibility specifier is. How do I specify the visibility of something? Let's just look at solidity. How do I specify the visibility of something in solidity? Yeah, access controller. So what are the terms that we use there? What are the visibility specifiers? Yeah, just public and private solidity. Yeah, there you go. Public, private for functions, you have public, private, external, and internal. For variables, you have public, private, and internal variables. Right? So yeah, it's the exact same thing. Okay, it's the exact same thing here. Okay, so you have these visibility specifier that basically tells you like that as Tirumala pointed out, that controls the access of a particular entity, and that tells you whether that entity can be accessed outside the module or not. Okay, but unlike Solidity, which has a more number of visibility specifiers, here we just deal with private and public functions. Okay. Okay, so what is private functions? Like those who know C, C++, Java, Solidity, any of these languages, you guys know what a private function is. What is the whole idea behind a private function? No idea. See, in Solidity, what is a private function? Yeah, in Solidity, you have a contract, and if something is only accessible from within that contract, it is a private entity, right? So here, a private function means if a function is only, yes, as Dawood has pointed out, like if a function is only visible within that module, right? It cannot be accessed outside the module. Then that is basically what we call a private function. So what will be a public function? Public function is basically the opposite of it, right? It is accessible outside the module, meaning other entities outside the module, like users or other modules and stuff like that, can access it. Now, can anybody guess which is the default visibility of a function in Move? which is the default. Yeah, there you go. So in move on Sui, the default visibility is actually private. Okay. When you're using when you declare a function without specifying any identifiers like visibility identifiers, it is set to private, not public. But in order to set a function as public, you have to provide the public keyword. Okay. Any questions there? So it is not public, like a function is not public when you declare it without any keywords. It's actually private. You have to provide a keyword saying that a function is public. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions or doubts regarding any of this? Or any questions regarding any of the things that we discussed so far? Okay, and then there is okay. So this is also another kind of you can say a visibility identifier. Okay, this is called as an entry function. Meaning an entry function is basically a function that acts as the entry point to that module. Okay. Oh. So yeah. So I'm sorry. Okay, so the thing is, so entry functions are something like for now, like the thing is, this concept means that you can actually set this function to be called or set this function to be the major entry point towards this module, right? Whenever you want to execute something, you can actually start from the entry block. So think of it like a main function, like whenever you are creating a program in JS or something, you have a main function where the execution starts or where you start the execution or where you start the entry into that whole code base, right? So similarly, you can set a function as an entry function. Okay, where you are saying that, okay, this is the point of entry for this module. But the thing is, when you set a function as entry, okay, just not a public entry function is different. But when you set a function as entry, it cannot be called from out. It can only be called from programmable transaction blocks, which we will learn what it is, right? So an entry function, just an entry function cannot be called from other blocks. Okay, it can only be called from programmable transaction blocks, which we will learn what it is. It is actually a unique feature of Sui. Okay, but the thing is, when you mention that a function is just an entry function, not a public entry function as it is mentioned here, if it is just an entry function, it cannot be called from outside, from other modules. It can only be called from programmable transactions like that. The thing is, you can actually program transactions to call functions and stuff. We'll learn a bit about that, and that is when you can actually understand the use case of entry functions. But for now, just know that these are functions that is considered as the entry points, and they can be used with something, or these functions can be called from sort of like that, sort of not exactly, but sort of like that. Payable functions, yeah, sort of like that. Payable means that you are dealing with coins and stuff, right? Yeah, it's like tokens and stuff, but yeah, in a way it is somewhat similar to that. Entry function is more of like a main function that can only be called from a programmable transaction block, right? If you just mention a function as entry, then it cannot be called from other modules. It can only be called from these programmable transaction blocks, which we'll see what it is. Okay. And then you have like, so in order to bypass that, you can provide the function as public. So a public entry function can actually be called from other modules. But if we don't give this public keyword and just mention it as an entry function, then it cannot be called from other modules. Okay, it's a special type of function that acts as an entry point to the module for programmable transaction blocks, which is an entity that we will learn about. Like we will learn about that thing in the coming sessions. But yeah, so this is also how, yeah, so you have the private and public, which is pretty much the same thing. Private functions means something that can only be, some functions that can only be accessed, or that is only visible within the module itself. You have public functions that can be accessed by modules outside the current given module, and you have something called entry functions, which acts as a point of entry for point of entry to the module, and that can be called from something called as the programmable transaction blocks. And in order to bypass that, you can actually give the function as public entry. Meaning then, like if you mention a function as public entry, then it can be called from other modules also. Okay, so we will learn the whole functionality of entry as we move to these whole things like programmable transaction blocks and stuff. But just know that there is a restriction, or there is a visibility specifier called entry. Okay, so yeah, any questions here? Yeah, here you have an assignment for providing a code demonstrating the use of public functions. Okay, so any questions or doubts here regarding the visibility specifiers and stuff? Any questions, doubts? Yes, slowly. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, right? So I think we can wind up the session with this, because we have already covered too much ground. So what I would suggest is you guys just go through the whole thing, and in case there is any doubts, just reach out on Discord, because we have covered a lot of ground here, right? Like declarations, scope, functions, all these kind of things, operators, and all these kind of things. The flow, like if else statements and all, like assert and everything. So just go through all this. If there is any questions or doubts, you can ask now, or you can just post it on Discord, right? So yeah, any questions? Anybody have any questions? Awesome. So if you don't have any questions, I think we can wind up for the day. Oh yeah, sure. Uh, so this is the Discord link. So within the Discord link, what you have to do is, so this is our server. So just go to the stat here button and just click on this emoji. Okay, then you will become the member of this server, and you can browse all the channels. So every conversation regarding Sui will happen in the Fortnite with Sui section, like the Hangout and everything. Okay. All right. Awesome. So if there are no doubts, I think we can wind up the session. So thank you guys. It's been fun. It's always fun to actually talk code with you guys. So yeah. In case of any doubts, just post it on Discord, and some of us will always be there. Like me, Sneha, Ashwin, somebody will always be there. Right? So yeah, I guess that's it for today. We'll meet tomorrow and we'll just continue with this. All right. Bye guys. See you. Just tag your post your learning on LinkedIn or Twitter and just tag us. Right? Okay. All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.